What is up, everybody? If we seem distracted here at the beginning, it's because Tucker is breathlessly watching the end of this Cowboys and Eagles game. A game it seems like the Eagles are going to be able to see out. However, I do have to say, Cowboys have 3 timeouts here. We'll kind of see where this goes. But I guess kind of assuming we're going where we think we're going, what are your kind of initial thoughts coming out of this really titanic matchup, a matchup that lived up to it? This has been an excellent,
Yeah, I
exciting
mean,
game. What are your kind of thoughts coming out of it
first thought is game of the year, right? I
so
think of
far?
all
Yeah.
the big matchups we've seen this season, and I mean, there's one this morning that we kind of hyped up, Chiefs Dolphins, and that even though it was close, ended up being a 7 point game, kind of fell flat. I think this
Yeah.
game, for the most part, has lived up to the billing. It had maybe the highest stakes of any game so far this season. If the Eagles win, they really have a stranglehold on the NFC East with a 2.5 game lead, 9 games into the season, and just the quality of quarterback play, I think, between Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott, to me stood out the most. I think this has been Jalen Hurts' best game of the year, probably his best game since Super Bowl last year, depending on how you feel about that, fumble he had in the second quarter. I thought he played a nearly flawless game, and so far through 58 minutes and 47 seconds, he's done the same thing here. And what Dak Prescott has done, throwing for 330 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, the quality of offensive play, the quality of the quarterback play between both teams, I just think has been the best we've seen all season on both sides. It's been just an unbelievable matchup back and forth. There are a lot of penalties. Both teams, I think, have 7 penalties, 7 or 8 penalties. So that, made it for a bit of a sloppy game. But I just think offensively, I mean, when you talk about wanting better quality of football, which we've brought up multiple times this season, this is kind of what we're looking for, isn't it? Like, I think for the first time all year, we're leaving a big matchup like this satisfied that it lived up to the billing.
And it wasn't, it's not, and I know when people say you just don't like what's happening in the NFL because you just want to see points. And that's partly true. I'm a fantasy guy. I like when people score touchdowns. That's better for me for as a fantasy guy. But this game isn't, particularly high scoring. It's what, 50, it's at 52 points now. So it's not particularly high scoring. And yet it is a, oh, did that just happen? Did they just fumble? Did they lose it? Um, Okay, so we're reacting to this
Eagles
live.
recovered.
I can't tell.
Eagles recovered according to the
Oh,
NFL
Eagles are
information
covered. All right.
system. So
Uh, all
yeah.
right, there we go. All right, here
So
we are. But yeah,
that
so
you
I
know what's
think that
crazy? This
this
is the
game,
third
it
time
wasn't
we've done
like
this.
it wasn't. Yeah.
This is the
What
third
was the
time
other
we've
one? Was it
recorded
the?
during the
Oh,
fourth
it was
quarter of
the.
an Eagles game. The Eagles have fumbled every time we've done it. We did it for the
That's
Jets
true.
game
And
two
one of
weeks
them.
ago when they lost, and we did it for the
Yeah, yeah,
Patriots game when Jalen Hurts fumbled in week 1.
yeah. And then it was. Yeah, it was an interception though, right? With the Jets. Also, we were recording during the. Do you remember the Russell Wilson? Like, it's not going to go down in history because the Broncos are kind of doing what they're doing. But like, didn't the Broncos have like the Hail Mary to win a game while we were
They did. They
recording?
did do that while we were recording. I didn't even turn my TV on because I thought that game was over. Why bother even trying to figure out my office TV?
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea that we can sneak in here at 7:30 while the game is on and get away with missing whatever happens has yet to actually occur.
Yeah, no, it is always it always is a bit of a stumble. Oh, I see that he hit AJ Brown. I mean, if I ran into AJ Brown, I'd probably drop the ball too. So I'm not really that mad
Yeah, it was
at
friendly
it, DeAndre
fire.
Swift. Yeah, but to your point about the quarterback play, I do think like even though this wasn't super like crazy high scoring, this isn't like a 40 to 38 game or anything like that. That might be scoregami. I don't know if that's a score that's even happened, but you know what I'm saying. It's not one of these wild scoring games. It's a pretty normal scoring game, but we saw good quarterback play. We saw both teams make plays. It has been a game of inches, and the Cowboys have a chance here. They're going to get the ball back with, around 50 seconds left, so they have a chance here. But this has been a game of inches for Dallas. We saw that touchdown that was ruled out on fourth down, correctly ruled out. But all of the calls against them have been correct. But we saw the Dak 2-pointer where he just happened to step out, or this is a lot more interesting because they only need a field goal instead of a touchdown if that 2-pointer hits. And so there's a lot going on here, and it's just a good game, not because it's super high scoring, because we're actually seeing good quarterback play, and getting to see good quarterback play in the year of our Lord 2023 is something that, it's just it hasn't happened. We haven't seen a lot of it. And so getting this has been really nice. That said, I guess Dak could really, in the next 46 seconds, I guess he could he could make us eat our words about good quarterback play. So we'll see what
Yeah, I
happens.
mean, certainly, and or he could, prove us right if he does something here and
Yeah.
there's a 40-yard PI to start off this drive. But you kind of just, I don't know, look across the board at what we've seen so far this season, and even the top billing quarterbacks have struggled. Patrick Mahomes and that offense has really struggled the last 3 or 4 weeks or so. Josh Allen has really come on, the last 2 months after a early start to the season. But yeah, I just watching this game for the first time, I really felt like both quarterbacks were going to consistently come up with big plays, and they were finding their guys, and there were mismatches. The Eagles had no answer for Ceedee Lamb. I don't think any defense in the NFL right now has an answer for AJ
The way they're
Brown.
using him, the way they're using him as CD right now, they're getting him outside, they're getting him inside, and they're moving him around. They're making it
They
hard to
used him in the
find him.
backfield on a second
Yeah.
down, I think either on the previous drive or 2 drives earlier, where they got him isolated on a linebacker or on just like an option route. And that's unfair for anybody. And I wonder if that's something we're going to maybe see a little bit more across the league. If you have someone like Ceedee Lamb, or even, we see it with Debo a lot, although he doesn't run a ton of routes out of the backfield. But I wonder, as NFL coordinators trying to find more space for their playmakers, do we see more wide receivers lined up in the backfield and running routes against linebackers? Because you've seen it today. They don't want Ceedee Lamb matched up with Darius Slay, even though I think Darius Slay or James Bradbury have had the best game. But they're isolating him on guys like Sidney Brown, on linebackers like Zach Cunningham, and that's part of the reason why he's absolutely dominated the Eagles so far.
And to Mike McCarthy's credit, because you're not going to find a ton of Mike McCarthy fans at sharpfootballanalysis.com, but to Mike McCarthy's credit, that is something he has done with Ceedee Lamb, and they have had pretty good game plans for him, getting him involved, getting him. There's another first down. Goodness, this is going to come down to the wire. I'm gonna just keep vamping until we'll allow Tucker to pay full attention to this wild game that we're watching.
Well, that's
But
not
yeah,
good.
this is. Oh yeah, is that Slay? Who's that?
That was Slay, and they got Reddick for roughing the passer on that play too.
That is. I don't know about that roughing call. By the way, there was a roughing call just while we're on roughing. There was a roughing call on a Washington Commander Ed rusher, KJ Henry, I believe was his name, today, in which literally all he did was sack Mac Jones. And they said he fell full body weight on him, which, first of all, that shouldn't be roughing the passer to begin with. But even if that's the rule, I don't think he did. I think he fell on his knees first, and it was one of the worst roughing calls I've ever seen.
That's such a weird rule. Like I think no one is satisfied with roughing the passer unless you're an actual quarterback or maybe a family member of a quarterback. No one really loves roughing the passer, but it's always interesting because I don't know, you almost find yourself upset when something weird happens and it doesn't get called, right? Like there was a play earlier where, when Jalen Hurts got hurt at the end of the first half, the Cowboys defender launched into his knee from the ground, and by rule, that's technically a penalty. I think it's a weak penalty. I don't think it should be a penalty, but by rule it is. And it's a weird moment as a fan, because do you get upset because things aren't called, or are you almost okay with it because you don't agree with the rule? And I feel that way with a lot of the, unnecessary roughness penalties. Is it's called at such an increased rate now. I think we're almost used to how light and how tight they call it. But as a result, you kind of find yourself rooting for them to call those light penalties when you may or not maybe don't agree with the call.
Yeah, there was one on the sideline today in what game was that? Was that the Dolphins and Chiefs game?
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes got hit on the sideline out of bounds. And he was clearly out of bounds. Like that was a late hit. And they brought in the rules expert and he said, oh no, because he was close to the first down, it's okay. And I agree with that explanation, but that's not how they call that rule. Like that's happened a million times to a number of other teams where that rule hasn't been called. So I don't know. I find it weird because I think at times their intentions are correct. They do call it correctly, but it's the inconsistency, which I think is probably what upsets people the most, isn't it? It's not so much the fact that these rules are tight. It's the fact that even the guys calling it and the guys enforcing the rules don't necessarily have a firm grasp on where that line is.
Yeah, and I think that, that play with Mahomes, so you have this issue too with the slides, right? If a quarterback's going out of bounds, but then now the quarterback's able to kind of fake it and get more yards, and we see that happen all the time. We saw it happen on, I believe, a Sam Howell run today where he kind of like got out of the grass. Oh no, sack.
I
Is
don't
that
know
it?
how he held on to that. That's unbelievable
Yeah,
that
that
he
was
held on
wild.
to the ball.
So, like, we saw it in that game where he kind of like, I don't know if the defenders were scared to hit him and he was able to get away and make a big play. And so I feel like some of these rules, they just kind of, I don't know. I get the idea, but if someone has 1 foot out of bounds and they get nudged by a defender, that shouldn't be a penalty. And so I feel that way a lot about a lot of these roughing too. Like at some point, defenders have to make plays, and if you're going to say that you have to not fall to the ground, you have to disobey the laws of gravity, then that seems to be an odd thing to expect a defender to do. It looks like we're going to have one more play here from the Cowboys, 3rd and 21. I can't
It's going
imagine
to
they
be
get
third
2
and
plays out of the
26. They're going
5
to get called
seconds.
for a delay game here.
Oh, that's not good. That is tough coaching. Is what that is.
Yeah, it's
That is
just
not ideal.
I don't know. Like I've never spent time in an NFL training camp. I imagine the 2-minute offense and situations like this are run just as much, if not more so. And getting a delay game, especially with the clock stopped, right? Because there's only 5 seconds. They threw the
Prayer.
yeah, and that was incomplete. So you have time. Like you're not rushing at the line to get a play like that is just unacceptable.
Yeah. I believe I'm gonna try to guess what happens here because I'm pretty sure you're gonna see
I
it
know what
before me.
happens here. And
I'm trying to gauge your response here.
I'm
I was
confused
trying
because
to
I
gauge.
have what happens, and yeah, okay.
Right. Game over.
Game
Big
over,
catch by
Eagles win.
Ceedee Lamb.
Well, because I
Again, that's
have the
another
the
game of inches
NFL
situation
game
here. Oh,
statistics
I
up on
got
my
you.
computer, so I see what happens before it shows up on the
Yeah.
TV. So something like that
Yeah.
is weird. Like Dak Prescott complete to Ceedee Lamb for 22 yards.
Yeah.
And I thought,
Yeah.
well, that's crazy that they were able to get that. But yeah, I mean, Eagles hold on for a ridiculous win. I mean, that
So that's a huge win for the Eagles because Rich and I talked about it on Thursday. They're going in their bye now. Very clearly, Jalen Hurts is not healthy. There is something wrong with his knee. We saw it flare up in the first half. He was able to come back and play, well in the second half. But clearly, something's not quite right with that knee. They head into the bye week, and then coming out of the bye week, they have just an absurdly difficult schedule, playing what I think are like 5 of the top 10 teams in the NFL coming out of the bye. They have the Chiefs, the Bills, the 49ers, the Cowboys again, and then the Seahawks. The Seahawks we'll talk about later. They had an absolutely horrid showing. And there's certainly questions to be asked about Geno Smith at this point. But I think those are all very good teams. And so to get this win against Dallas, to get to the bye at 8-1, to give themselves some cushion heading into that schedule, this was just an absolute huge win, a huge hold on there for the Eagles.
yeah, and I think this is a
What do you think?
game you mentioned, like how tough their schedule is coming up after the bye week, and they desperately need the bye week because Jalen Hurts' knee hasn't been right since week 5. He got hurt again. I think it was against the Dolphins. He started limping around, and someone asked Nick Sirianni what happened. He said, "Oh, well, he aggravated whatever happened to him in the Rams game, and that's been bothering him since." Then he took that big shot to his knee at the end of the first half here, and he clearly isn't right. Like he isn't running the ball as much as he was earlier in the season or even last season. Like his rushing numbers don't even compare to what he did a year ago. But what I think is crazy is his ability to win games now with just his arm, which even last year or 2 years ago, you would have thought wasn't ever going to be a possibility with this guy. Like he seemed like a true dual threat quarterback, seemed like someone maybe like Cam Newton, who once his legs started to go, maybe he wasn't going to be a viable franchise quarterback. And once again, what you saw today was just unbelievable. His ability to hang in the pocket, he could scramble and get free when he needed to, but there weren't explosive runs. He wasn't converting all the third downs using his legs on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. He was beating the Cowboys from the pocket, and having this week off certainly I think helps his knee get healthy. And for the Eagles, now you enter this, 5-game, just absolutely brutal stretch, which is probably a 6-game stretch if you include today, where if you go 3-2 over the next 5, you
I
have
feel
such a
good.
lead over Dallas in the division right now that doesn't kill you. And you have a 2-game lead on both Dallas and San Francisco for the number 1 seed in the NFC. And you obviously have to worry about the Lions, who are the only 2-loss team in the conference right now. But if you're the Eagles, like, you don't have to go 4-1 or 5-0 over this killer 5-game stretch. It really gives you some buffer before you get to the last 3 games of the season, with 2 against the Giants, who look absolutely hapless. Probably won't have Daniel Jones for the rest of the year after his injury today, and an Arizona Cardinals team that threw in the towel last week when they traded, top 5 quarterback Josh Dobbs based on how he played today in Minnesota. So I think for the Eagles, this is probably their biggest game of the year, and them winning it really sets them up to be on top of the NFC at, 2 months from now.
Takes so much of the pressure off, and that's the key for them in this win. The other part of this, coming into the bye week, we're going to have to figure out what happened with Dallas Goedert, his forearm injury. It didn't look great. I'll be honest with you. And given how condensed their target tree is, and given how much they rely on those 3 guys, on AJ Brown, on Devontae Smith, who had a touchdown in this game and is kind of starting to round more into form, I guess. Although he did just have 3 catches for 51 yards. But given how much they rely on that top 3, Goedert missing time would be a concern, I think, especially going into that. I mean, are you going to get more out of, who are you going to get more out of here? Julio,
It was an issue they had last
Zacchaeus?
year, right?
Yeah.
Because Goddard missed time for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks last year, and he's always missed time. He's never been healthy for a full season. That's always kind of been a knock on him. And you kind of look ahead and who else they have on the depth chart. Jack Stoll is their number 2 tight end. He's not really a pass catching threat. He's more of a blocker. You have Grant Calcaterra, so their number 3 tight end. He was inactive today, but he isn't necessarily a threat. And you go and look at the games that Goddard missed last year. The Eagles offense really struggled. That ended the season, where they struggled against the Bears and that whole month of December where they just didn't really look right, coincided with Dallas Goedert not being on the field. So if he misses time, which based on the injury, I wouldn't be surprised if we find out in a couple hours or tomorrow that his arm is broken based on the way he kind of went down. Like, that certainly doesn't look like a soft tissue injury. Maybe it's a hyperextended elbow and, he can come back in a little bit, but I worry about that passing offense. You're right, because you have AJ Brown, you have Devontae Smith. Maybe you get Julio Jones more involved and some underneath routes as a physical receiver out of the slot. But if Dallas Goedert's not playing, they don't have a replacement for him on the roster. They don't have a legitimate number 2 tight end who can step in and take his snaps and be a competent receiver from the tight end position.
Then I just want to say, kind of on this, I don't think this isn't a bad loss for Dallas. This is, they played well, they showed well, and then this is another huge game from Dak Prescott, who now coming out of the bye against the Rams, he was 25 of 31 for 304 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Rams. In this game, he's 29 of 44 for 376 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did take 5 sacks. That's less than ideal. He took 3. He's been taking probably more sacks than he should. But these are 2 massive games for Prescott. The offense has looked a lot better, has looked a lot more functional. We're still not getting what we need, I think, out of Tony Pollard here. He did have a long run today, but we need to see more explosion out of him, I think, and probably just more explosion in general out of this passing game. But this was a fine showing for the Cowboys. The Cowboys are, still in a great place in the NFC, and they've got the Giants, then the Panthers, and the Commanders coming up in the next 3. They should be able to kind of get a few wins, stack a few wins, and I think they're going to be fine. This is not a bad loss for the Cowboys, in my opinion.
No, I don't think so at
So
all.
we are going to talk a little bit more about not a bad one. We're going to move on and talk a little bit about the legend that is CJ Stroud. But before we get there, I do want to mention a great promotion that we have running this week over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. And that is our free week. We do it every single week, every single year, our free week at Sharp Football. You can get all of our betting recommendations, including sides, totals, and props, our detailed game previews and predictions for every matchup, written by Rich Rebar, our worksheet. Receive access to our fantasy football player rankings, our DFS best plays, which I know we're high on Stroud today, CJ Stroud today, so that went well. And you'll have complete access to all our exclusive content. You can get all of that free for 7 days over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. You can go to sharp.football to get more information. Make sure you go and check that out. It's an absolutely great deal. All right, let's get into CJ Stroud, the legend of CJ Stroud. Threw for 470 yards and 5 touchdowns, set a record for rookie passing yards. His final drive, the game-winning drive, went 75 yards in 40 seconds. He connected with Tank Dell for the game-winning touchdown. Just a marvelous performance by CJ Stroud. This website has been Team CJ Stroud for a very, very long time. I think it was week 3 where Warren Sharp wrote an article about how good CJ Stroud was playing, even though the Texans, we hadn't seen it show up in wins, how good he was playing. Last week was not great. I would say that had more to do with coaching than it did with Stroud and kind of their approach to offense. We didn't see that this week. Maybe that was because Dameon Pierce was out. I'm not sure, but they attacked this Bucs defense, and Stroud was just amazing. Just unbelievable game from him.
Yeah, it's crazy, especially because of how one-dimensional their offense was. I mean, they really leaned on CJ Stroud to carry the load. And normally when we talk about a rookie quarterback stepping up, it's, in a more balanced attack. Hey, they ran the ball. They kept the pressure off him. No, I mean, he threw the ball 42 times. He had 470 yards. He had 5 touchdowns. I mean, for a rookie to put up the kind of numbers he has so far, and what he did today just took everything to a whole nother level. It's crazy because you mentioned we've been high on him the whole season. And I don't think there's anyone in the world right now who thinks that, the Carolina made the wrong choice picking Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. And what he did today, I mean, that's probably top 3, if not the best quarterback performance of the day, maybe top 3 quarterback performance of the year. And
I was going to say of the year, yeah.
In that division right now, I mean, sitting at 4-4 with the rookie quarterback, with all the momentum they have right now, it's hard to not be excited if you're a Texans fan about the future of this franchise based on what you've seen from DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud so far.
I wrote before the season that this season would be a success for the Texans if Will Anderson and CJ Stroud looked like the cornerstones that they needed them to be after what the draft capital that they spent to get them. And they both do. And more than that, this team, I mean, it's tough because it's the AFC. It's tough because they have a decent gap here between them and the Jaguars. It's tough because they lost to the Panthers last week, and they'd be in a much kind of different situation here if they hadn't given that game up to the Panthers, which might go down as kind of a bit of a difficult loss for them, a tough loss for them in the final kind of season standings. But I mean, otherwise, this team is exceeding all expectations on both sides of the ball, exceeding all expectations, even though, the defense maybe didn't have its best game today. And I just have to say, like, you mentioned Bryce Young. CJ Stroud was very clearly the number 1 quarterback in this class. And this isn't hindsight. You can go look at Sharp Football Analysis in our draft coverage. You can look what Rich Rebar said and tweeted. You can look what Ryan McChrystal said and tweeted. I unfortunately did not tweet my belief in CJ Stroud being the clear number 1, but I have texts. If you want screenshots of texts with friends, I can go and find those. He was very clearly the number 1. And for the Panthers to trade up, spend all that draft capital, which I do think was the right move, to then take Bryce Young over him, who Bryce Young is probably still going to have a good career. CJ Stroud looks different. And I mean, this could all look stupid. Maybe CJ Stroud, maybe this is just, maybe this is just the early, maybe Bryce Young comes back and ends up being the best quarterback. But what we've seen, these early returns, that looks like a tough decision from the Panthers. And so it's going to be, especially, I mean, today in the wake of Bryce Young throwing 2 pick sixes and a loss to the Colts, and CJ Stroud doing what he did. It's easy to say that in the cold light of day tomorrow. Maybe this isn't looking as like so hot takey. Maybe we're not feeling so hot takey, but sitting right now, it feels really tough for the Panthers. And if I were a Panthers fan, I'd be like, we might have missed one here.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's not like we're talking about CJ Stroud doing great things as a rookie quarterback. Like, he's doing great things as a quarterback. Like, he's so far ahead of the curve that we aren't talking about, like, man, he had a great game, but he threw a pick 6. Or, man, look at those 3 really good throws he had but he was struggling in the third quarter. No, he put together 4 quarters of really good football against a Buccaneers defense that they aren't great, but they're a professional defense. And I mean, doing it with the weapons he has, like, people like Tank Dell, and he had 6 for 114 today, but it's not like he's out there with guys like, the Eagles have or the 49ers have. Like, he didn't have Pro Bowl wide receivers and tight ends and running backs. He had a backup running back today who had 13 carries for 26 yards. It didn't matter. I mean, he still came back, and that was another thing. It's not like he was front running the whole game. They were tough, high leverage snaps throughout the game that he kept coming up big in. And you're right. Like, it might be anecdotal. It's crazy to, settle the score 9 weeks into their career, but especially because Bryce Young did win the one head-to-head battle last week, and maybe would have had a different conversation last week, 7 days ago. But as of right now, if you're looking at the Panthers and you're a Panthers fan, what David Tepper's done with his organization over the last 3 or 4 years, as much as he wants to win, it's all been wrong. He's taken a lot of missteps from the time that he took over this franchise, and it's worrisome.
Yeah, I think you at least have to be a little worried. On Stroud, and one more, and we'll move off Stroud here in a second. I do want to say, you mentioned how good this game was. So Next Gen Stats said that he was 6 for 8 for 199 yards and 3 touchdowns on throws of 20 air yards or more. So deep throws, that's incredible. And that it was the highest Next Gen passing score of any quarterback this season. So again, this was one of the best quarterback games we've seen of the year, if not the best. It really was a special game. All right, let's talk bit about injuries. We're going to go a little bit negative here. We're going to move on to a quarterback who hasn't had the best games of the season, and that is Daniel Jones, who, looking at this injury, so Daniel Jones suffered a knee injury in this game. He suffered it the play before he ultimately left. On the play he ultimately left, it looked like his knee went out on him. When I watched this injury, this feels like we're going to find out on Monday that he's out for the season. Is that kind of where you are as well?
Yeah, I think a surprise if we see him again this season. And I don't know if it's a torn ACL, but it sure seems to be leaning that way, the way it looked. And I think initial reports are coming back that it's certainly feared to be that. And the Giants, who came into the season with high expectations, you paid your franchise quarterback after he took positive steps last year. You seem to have everything figured out with your head coach and Brian Dable, who impressed last year. And now you're in a lost season. And not only are you stuck in a lost season, you have Tommy DeVito at quarterback for at least the next 3 weeks as Tyrod Taylor is on the IR. I mean, you don't have any other option in your organization right now. You can't make a trade because the trade deadline was last week. It's Tommy DeVito or bust through like Thanksgiving at this point. So I don't know. If you're a Giants fan, pick up a hobby on Sunday afternoons, because I don't know if it's going to look that pretty these next couple of weeks or really the rest of the year.
So what I will say for Tommy DeVito is he definitely did better this week than he did last week. He threw for positive yards, so that's a step in the correct direction from where we were last week. He had that touchdown to Wan'Dale Robinson in the back corner, but I mean, he took 6 sacks. It was not good. It's pretty clear that Tommy DeVito, at least at this point in his career, is not someone who should be starting on Sundays. And like you said, trade deadline's over. What are they going to do? I mean, is Carson Wentz, is he just hunting elk somewhere? Like, what is Carson Wentz doing? Do we call up
What I
Carson
thought
Wentz?
when we had because we had a rash of quarterback injuries last week.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think it's Carson Wentz and God punishing other quarterbacks and other teams for not signing Carson Wentz? Like, there's just going to keep being more and more injuries until Carson finally gets signed by somebody?
It's a good theory. Yeah, it's a good theory. I like when we run down the conspiracy theory holes. Yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah, no, it is funny. We've had all these injuries. Kirk Cousins out for the season. It looks like, we'll see what happens with Daniel Jones, and then Anthony Richardson's out for the season. Although Minshew, has been playing fine. There are all these injuries here to these quarterbacks, and yeah, Carson, I don't know what he's doing. Maybe he's just maybe he just leads hunts now, which that seems like a great time. So I hope you're living your
If you're
best
ever
life.
bored, he has a
Carson Wentz.
YouTube channel that he runs with his brother where they just review hunting gear. That's like his hobby. He has a YouTube channel where him and his brother review like the latest in guns and bows and arrows and all of that.
Yeah, that's the most on brand thing I've ever heard for Carson Wentz. But yeah, the point is that it's not there's probably not a quarterback answer out there. Like you said, Tyrod's on IR for at least 3 more games. So we're running in the situation that this offense is probably dead in the water. That means that from fantasy, that might mean that Saquon Barkley is dead in the water. Although what I will say is they're going to keep feeding him the ball. And as long as he can stay healthy, and please stay healthy, Saquon Barkley, he is going to keep getting fed. So that's probably enough in kind of the running back landscape we live in now. But yeah, the rest of this offense, Darren Waller's on IR. If you were kind of getting excited about Wan'Dale, he got the touchdown today, but you can't really rely on that. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough out here for the Giants. It's looked like it was going to be a very tough day for the Minnesota Vikings, who suffered a lot of injuries, a spate of injuries. The worst of those injuries was Cam Akers, who suffered an Achilles injury. It seems pretty clear from the way the Vikings are talking and watching the video that he suffered a ruptured Achilles. That would be the second time in the last 3 years that's happened to him. I believe it's a different ankle this time. That would mean he's out for the season. And if that's the case, I mean, it's just
I believe it's the other one,
right? Yeah, it's the other one. Yeah, but it's just awful for him.
Yeah, and that's a tough break for a kid who's only, I think, 24 and 25. Like, he's still young, but I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
I can't imagine he fully recovers and becomes better than what he was. And for a guy who had 600 yards as a rookie and 800 yards his first full year back from that injury, and seemed to be someone who could progress and really had a pretty big role in this Minnesota offense since getting traded there, even though he had varying degrees of success, but they seemed fine, pretty much splitting the carries between him and Alexander Mattison. Yeah, it's a tough break for him because at 25, coming off a second torn Achilles, there aren't a lot of options out there if you're a running back in the NFL.
What I'll say from Minnesota's perspective is that Alexander Mattison was bad again in this game. He had 16 carries for 44 yards, 2.8 yards per carry. And they've been trying to get Cam Akers involved. They've been trying to get other people involved in this backfield because it's pretty clear that Mattison is not, making it happen. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. If you're in deeper leagues and you're looking on the waiver wire, maybe Ty Chandler is somebody that you can look at. I know Kine Nguanu is, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I apologize if I messed that up. That's off the top of my head. But I think he was inactive today and he's dealing with an injury. So maybe Ty Chandler is someone in deeper leagues. If you're really looking for running back, maybe that's somebody you could look at. The other injuries that we saw here from the Vikings, first was KJ Osborn, he kind of got sandwiched, and it was kind of a scary looking situation, but he ended up walking off the field, or at least getting up and walking to the cart. They took him into the locker room. He didn't come back, very clearly has a concussion, but he also was like, there's video of him like celebrating with his teammates afterwards. So it seems like, as scary as that hit looked, that Osborn, he has a concussion and he'll have to go through the protocol, but it seems like it's not as bad as it could be. Jaren Hall also, however, suffered a concussion in this game. He opened up the game. He was going to be the guy that started and kind of played for Kirk Cousins. Things were going decently well for him early on, was getting involved in the run game. Fortunately, suffered a concussion. He got knocked out, and then that brought in the legend, the absolute legend that is Joshua Dobbs, who, if you need somebody to start, too bad that he's not available for the Giants. If you need somebody to start on no rest, no preparation whatsoever, Josh Dobbs is your guy. Came in, led the Vikings to a win over the Falcons, which we have to talk about the Falcons. Just wild. In your wildest dreams, did you imagine that this is what we'd be talking about this morning?
No. And like, when they traded for Joshua Dobbs, it certainly felt obvious that he was going to take over at some point, right? Maybe not this quickly, but I mean, he said after the game, he didn't know anybody's name. He's never taken a snap from Garrett Bradbury. He didn't even take a snap in practice. He's never thrown a ball to anyone on that team. And all he did was go out 20 for 30, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns, no problem. Leads the team to a comeback win. It's just unbelievable. And I think there's maybe a role for Joshua Dobbs, or maybe he doesn't have a team, but he just kind of floats around the NFL. And if you have a quarterback injury, you can sign him for 1 week, and he's just kind of the designated stopgap quarterback around the NFL.
The all-time quarterback for the entire team.
He's the all-time quarterback for the entire league. If your quarterback gets hurt on Wednesday, you call Joshua Dobbs, he flies in. You know, like how in hockey they have the emergency backup quarterback, and it's like some college kid or some like 30-year-old who plays beer league hockey that lives relatively close to the arena. Like that's what Joshua Dobbs' role should be in the NFL.
No, it was incredible. And we saw him do very similar things what he was doing in Arizona, right? He made plays with his legs. He ended up with 66 yards and a touchdown on the ground, and he extended plays and made throws that way. And I am, especially after we see some practice reps under his belt, I am much more confident in Dobbs keeping this offense going. And if we get Justin Jefferson back, or when we get Justin Jefferson back, keeping Justin Jefferson kind of in a good fantasy space than I would have been in Jaren Hall. And I think, moving forward, this has to be Dobbs moving forward. And we'll see, first of all, Jaren Hall has a concussion and we hope he gets better. And he's going to have to make his way through the protocol. But I think that we're pretty clear that, Dobbs is where we're going here. On the Falcons side, I mean, what are we doing? What what are the Falcons doing? How do you lose to Josh Dobbs? How how is this offense still so bad? I mean, Heineke didn't set the world on fire. Arthur Smith said they're gonna have to look at a quarterback, but Ritter and Heineke aren't great. And I think, obviously they're gonna shoulder some of the blame. But at this point, Smith has to shoulder some as well. Tyler Algier had one more carry than Bijan Robinson and just one fewer target than Bijan Robinson. The defense has been exposed over the last 2 weeks. This team is going the wrong way, and I don't, especially with how combative Arthur Smith has been in the media over the last week. I wonder if we are starting to see the beginning of the end of his time with the Falcons. I wonder if that's what this is.
Yeah, and it feels weird because part of me feels bad for Arthur Smith because you don't have a real quarterback, but
He doesn't have
Arthur Smith also chose to do this, right? Like you chose to hitch your wagon to Desmond Ritter, and you chose to hitch your wagon to Taylor Heineke, right? Like you didn't get stuck in this situation, and man, this is year one, and you haven't had the opportunity to go out and get a legitimate franchise quarterback. You have, and you've chosen this route, which some other coaches have. And more often than not, like it fails spectacularly if you're a young coach, first time coach, and you try the retread quarterbacks. Like I think about Matt Rule across that division in Carolina. That defense was playing really well by the end of his tenure there, but he hitched his wagon to Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, and it didn't work out. That offense sputtered, and as a result, he's now in Nebraska. And yeah, you look at Arthur Smith, and they certainly have offensive weapons, but the fact that they can't get him the ball, and the reason they can't get him the ball is he never got a legitimate quarterback. That's on you. Like that's all a part of the situation there. And when you look at their leading receivers, and Jonnu Smith and Kadarius Hodge are 1 and 2 over Kyle Pitts, and obviously Drake London was hurt this week and didn't play, but I don't know, like, why are you drafting Bijan Robinson top 10 if he's going to get out carried by Tyler Algier? Why are you drafting Kyle Pitts if he's only going to get 5 targets and 56 yards today? It just, we joked about it a lot because it was working and they were still winning some games, but it's just malpractice. Like any other coach who just decides, hey, all this great draft capital we use, we're not going to actually use the players we spend it on, makes no sense. And instead of using that draft capital to move up and get a legitimate franchise quarterback, you chose this route and you still aren't getting them the ball. It feels like malpractice. And you're right. The way he's been competitive, I can't imagine he lasts much longer in Atlanta. Maybe he gets to the end of the season, but I would be shocked if Arthur Smith is the Falcons head coach week 1 next year.
I think the thing with Bijan is when they drafted him, and Dan Pizzuta actually wrote a really good article for the site. Dan Pizzuta, a great follow, by the way. Go on Twitter, find Dan Pizzuta. He wrote an excellent article for the site about how their running game was already really good, but maybe Bijan, what he's going to do is unlock more of what's going to happen in the passing game and getting him involved as a passer. And I think that probably was the plan, and we just haven't seen that part of it. We saw it a little bit. We've seen him make plays in the passing game. I still remember that absurd catch he made on a receiving touchdown. I can't even remember what week. It might have been the London game, actually. And so he's gotten so involved there, but to not be getting him involved and just what a playmaker he is there, maybe there's something going on with Bijan from a health perspective because Smith has some quotes about needing to limit his workload. So maybe there's something going on there as well. But then obviously we had the headache game, and that was a little bit odd. So maybe there's stuff going on behind the scenes, but it's the vibes. The vibes are not great in Atlanta. And in the NFC South, I mean, we're starting to see some teams pull. We're starting to see the Saints pull ahead. The Saints get a win. It was tougher than it should have been against Tyson Bagent. These quarterbacks that we're talking about, man, this is wild. But it was closer than it should have been against Tyson Bagent and the Bears, but they end up getting a win. The Bucks lose, the Falcons lose, the Panthers lose. I think we're starting to see that the Saints are the class of this division, especially if the Falcons are going to keep going the way they're going. And I don't even know if the Saints are good. I kind of don't think their offense works, at least with Derek Carr there. But I they're probably going to win this thing by default. Is kind of where we're headed.
Yeah, I don't know what the future holds for that team, and I don't know if Arthur Smith is the guy who, if I'm that front office, I want him around. And maybe he is in lockstep with their vision and everything, and they're all on the same page. But I don't know. Like the GM has to worry about his job security too, right? And the rest of the front office has to worry about their job security too. And if instead of using high draft picks on a quarterback, you went out and you got a tight end and a wide receiver and a running back, and they aren't a part of your offense, that's an issue. That's an issue for everyone involved. It just, I don't know. It felt like a weird situation all year, but at least they had their head above water. And listen, like no one came into the season with sky high expectations for Atlanta, right?
They were first in the division. They were first in the division, what, 2 weeks ago? They were first in the division? Like,
yeah,
that's how quickly this has happened.
In August, hey, they're 4-5 through 9 weeks. A lot of people would say, well, that's about right. Like, that's what their expectations should be. But I think if you look at it as a whole and you take a step back and really put everything in perspective, it's been a bit of a disappointment. Because I don't know if the guys that you're hoping takes a step forward and become the building blocks of the next great Falcons team, have they really done that? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's a concern just for everybody kind of in that organization moving forward. We have a couple more big games to talk about. So I want to get through just kind of rapid fire a few injuries here. We had Christian Watson leave with a chest. They said they were checking him for a chest, back, and concussion. That's what they were checking him for.
It's like hockey, right? Upper body?
Exactly. Upper body. Matt LaFleur said they're confident he was not concussed, so maybe he's not going to be out for long. He might have just gotten the wind knocked out of him. It was a bit of an odd thing from him. With Josh Downs, he left with a knee injury, the same knee injury he entered the week with or entered the game with. It looked like he was questionable in that game. It seems like it flared up. He didn't return. They didn't need him. So we'll kind of have to see how that injury is. And then one more quick thing, a transaction. Josh Palmer was sent to injured reserve on Sunday. That means he's going to be gone for at least 4 games. We have Quentin Johnson, definitely going to be a guy that's going to get more targets, but they also, in kind of a corresponding move, activated Jalen Guyton off of the PUP list. And Guyton's really interesting to me if you're in deep fantasy leagues. He is the kind of deep threat that they need. Maybe he's not going to get more than 2, 3, 4 targets a game, but they've needed that deep threat. They tried to use Johnston there. That is not the player he is. Last week, they used him more around the line of scrimmage, which is how you should take advantage of just his excellent after the catch ability. He's just not a downfield receiver right now, and trying to use him down there is not going to help him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Guyton, how much he plays, what we see out of Quentin Johnson, and kind of all that moving forward. But just if you're in deeper leagues, keep an eye on Guyton and what we see from him on Monday night. All right, we had a question here in the chat from Tristan. Bigger fraud, Seattle or Miami? And those are the next 2 games we need to talk about. It's a good question. I mean, are the Dolphins ever going to beat a good team? I suppose is the question. 0-3 against the Bills, Eagles, and Chiefs. They scored 20, 17, and 14 in those big 3 games. If you take the Broncos game out, and that's 70 points, which obviously skews things. But if you take that Broncos game out, even if you take that game out, their average against the other teams on their schedule so far has been 33 points per game. And so we see a stark difference between the good teams and what they've played. Their schedule's actually not that bad, but the final 3 games are the Cowboys, at the Ravens, and then the Bills, which could be rough. I don't know how good this Dolphins team is. You could make excuses. The first 2 losses are on the road. This one was in Germany. But they have to figure out how to play against the better teams, because they're definitely making the playoffs, especially with the schedule they have. But they have to figure out how to play it, and they're going to just be questions about this team until they do.
Yeah, I need to see it beat a good team, right? And it's not that crazy to think, but they kind of feel like a good team that wants to be a great team, and they've looked like that at times, but only against bad competition. And when you kind of look at almost everyone on that team, Tua Tagovailoa, even Mike McDaniel, that's kind of been their thing since last year. Is can you do it against good teams? Can you do it in the big moment? Can you win a close game? Can you beat a team in the postseason? And so far, they've proven that they can. And Today was a weird game. You fell down 21-0, and then they scored twice quickly after that Mahomes fumble, and it seemed like it was going to be close, and then he still kind of fell apart. But if the difference through 9 weeks is so stark between good teams and bad teams that you've played, that we have no other reason to believe that you are a better team than what you've shown so far. You're better, certainly, than the really bad teams, but right now they seem like a 5 or 6 seed in the playoffs, and maybe if they get out of wild card weekend, they'll be lucky. I don't see this team being built for a deep run in the postseason right now.
Yeah, and it's tough too because the concern I had previously was with the defense, and the defense, showed up today. I mean, we need to. I keep having this conversation with whoever will listen that the Chiefs' offense, it's it's not right. It's not clicking the way it should. But the Dolphins' defense did enough to win this game. That had been the thing I had been concerned about. They kind of stepped up. The offense couldn't do it. Again, they just couldn't do it here. It is a massive win for the Chiefs coming off that sloppy Broncos loss, but I mean, we know who they are. They're going in the bye. Both these teams are going in the bye. They'll retool. They both have good coaches, and we'll see kind of moving forward. To Tristan's question about the bigger frauds, I had kind of hitched my wagon to the Seahawks. I was getting excited about the Seahawks, about their defense, and this was a demoralizing loss if you were hitched to the wagon of the Seahawks. Geno Smith once again struggled. He's been struggling with turnovers for a while now. He struggled in this game. They scored 3 points against the Ravens. The Ravens absolutely demolished them. We even got Tyler Huntley in this game, and Tyler Huntley threw a touchdown. That is where we were with this game with the Seahawks. It's just this team has the ingredients. It has the defense. They made that big trade for Leonard Williams. It has the weapons on offense. This team has the ingredients to be good. They're still, I think, tied for the division lead with the 49ers. They're almost certainly going to make the playoffs in the NFC, but they lost that game to the Bengals where they just couldn't get over the hump. They ended up beating the Browns on that kind of last second touchdown, but that was against the PJ Walker Browns. And then they get absolutely demolished here by the Ravens. I don't know what to make of this team. What do you kind of think of them?
Yeah, coming into today, I hadn't really looked deep into their schedule and analyzed the Seahawks all that much. And watching that game against Baltimore, they just didn't look like they belonged. Geno Smith really struggled through 2 picks today. Just their offense couldn't get anything going. And Baltimore really pulled away at the end because I think it was only like a 20-point game going into the fourth quarter, and they just blew them out of the water at the end. But same thing, like you look at their wins, they beat PJ Walker, they beat a Cardinals team that isn't trying to win. Then you beat the Giants and Panthers, and then you have that Lions win in week 2, which is probably the thing that's keeping them afloat in a lot of people's mind. But they have a couple easier games. You have Washington this week, which shouldn't be too difficult. But that's another team like Miami that I just think they need to prove themselves. You need to prove yourself with a big win, and maybe that comes against the 49ers or the Cowboys or the Eagles. I mean, they have ample opportunity coming up in the next couple of weeks to really, affirm themselves, especially in that division right now with the 49ers. They're right there neck and neck with San Francisco to really, get a high seed in the NFC. But I don't know. I mean, their big issue right now is turnovers. They've turned the ball over multiple times, I think, in each of the last 4 games. They won twice, obviously, against Arizona and Cleveland, but they can't take care of the football. And as a result, their offense just can't get out of its own way. And their defense is struggling to stop opponents on short fields. It's really frustrating to watch them right now.
Yeah, that's the word. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch because even if you look at Geno Smith's kind of peripherals and you look at kind of his off target rate and things like that, it doesn't look bad. It's just not working. And Kenneth Walker is not a particularly efficient running back. He can create big plays, but he's going to have a lot of negative plays as well. That's just who he is as a running back. That is not saying anything bad about him. That just is who he is as a running back. And so you look at all these ingredients at DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and it should be working. What I'll say is that Washington game, if you're going to get right against anybody, that Washington game would be a good place to start. Although they did limit Mac Jones, I got wrong on the over on Mac Jones because Juju Smith-Schuster dropped that pass at the end. So thank you, Juju. I really do appreciate that. For the Ravens, I want to mention from a waiver wire perspective, Keaton Mitchell, 9 for 138 with a touchdown, had a 60-yard run. After he came off IR, he was someone I picked up in all my deep leagues, thinking, all right, they just have Gus Edwards now and Justice Hill, and Gus Edwards has been playing great, but they always want that kind of second back to go with Gus Edwards. And I thought it was going to be Mitchell. We'll see how much of it was kind of game scripty, but Mitchell got his chance and made huge plays in this game. Keaton Mitchell made a lot of noise in training camp before the injury. They kept him on the roster. If you're in deeper leagues, he's certainly somebody that I'm interested in looking at on the waiver wire. A couple other waiver wire names here before we get out of here. K. Dotton obviously had a big game. K. Dotton's been involved in that Bucks passing offense. That Bucks team has to pass. The running game doesn't work. So maybe he's an interesting name. Noah Brown had a massive game today. We'll see kind of where the volume goes. The Texans have shown a tendency to lean too much into the run, but he is playing as the third wide receiver there. And so, Robert Woods, we'll see what happens with the Woods injury, but he had a massive game. So certainly somebody to call out as well. All right, we got to get out of here, but kind of looking forward with, you're basking in the glory of your big Eagles win. What are you looking forward to here and as we head into week 10?
The big game for me, I think, next week is between the 49ers and Jaguars next week. San Francisco has 3 straight losses. The one thing they've struggled to do is take care of the football. They've turned the ball over 6 times the last 3 games. You now go against a Jacksonville team. I think is first in turnovers forced and takeaways this season. They're 5th in points per drive allowed this season. They're a really tough matchup, I think, for San Francisco defensively, and that's something where San Francisco now has a bye. They're both coming off bye weeks. I'm really interested to see if Brock Purdy, who I was impressed with the first couple of games of the season, I thought last year was a lot of smoke and mirrors. Thought he came back and really played well the first couple of weeks this season before turning it around. I'm excited to see what Kyle Shanahan and that offense kind of has drawn up after a week off, after a week of rest. Maybe get Deebo Samuel back in the fold, which certainly will help. And then you go against a tough defense in Jacksonville. And Jacksonville's a team with only 2 losses. And I think a lot of people are kind of sleeping on a little bit. They aren't mentioned in the same breath as teams like Kansas City or Buffalo or Cincinnati, maybe even Baltimore at the top of the AFC. I'm curious to see that matchup next week at 1:00 because I think those are 2 teams with a lot of questions, and going against each other will probably give us some answers.
Yeah, the Jaguars, I think their defense is playing better than we expected, but their offense hasn't clicked. And so they've kind of been riding under the water a little bit there. And it'll be interesting to see what they do against a good team. By the way, I just pulled up the schedule and I looked at the primetime matchups we have for next week. On Thursday night, we have the Panthers at the Bears. So super excited for that Thursday night game. And then on Sunday night, we have the Jets at the Raiders, which I knew that because for some reason that game didn't get flexed out. I have no idea why. And then on Monday night, we have the Broncos at the Bills. So Broncos, hey, maybe they'll come out of the bye. They'll make some noise. We'll see what the Bills do. We actually have a question here. What do you guys think of the Bengals versus Bill game? Need 35 points from Allen and the Bills defense. If you don't know, we record this ahead of those games, right after the games are over. So if you're listening to this a podcast, come join us on YouTube at 7:30 Eastern every single Sunday. I like your chances. I think this game is going to pop off. And so I'm hoping for the best there. What I'm looking for coming up in week 10, this is going to be a quarterback just disaster. We have no Mahomes, no Hurts, no Tua, all the injuries, those primetime games. The NFL has to field a better product because this is getting tough. We got so excited about what we saw in this Eagles Cowboys game because we had 2 good quarterbacks playing well, and we need more of that. And so hopefully we get that tonight from the Bills and Bengals as well. We have a lot coming up for you this week. Don't forget that you can get all of our premium content for free. Go to sharp.football. You can get it free this week, 7 days of it free. Sharp.football. Go and check that out. Stay tuned to our YouTube. Subscribe over on YouTube. Search Warren Sharp and find us. And we will be back to talk to you soon.